It was a Friday afternoon, the 11th of March, 2011. Clocks ticked towards 2:46 p.m. In Japan, life moved at its usual pace. Children were in schools, some perhaps looking forward to the weekend. Office workers were busy at their desks. Fishermen were out on the seas. Then, without any further warning, the ground began to shake. It was not a mere tremor. This was something far more violent. A terrifying primal force had been unleashed from deep within the earth. A nation, so accustomed to seismic activity, was about to face its worst nightmare, a truly dreadful experience. The magnitude was almost beyond comprehension. A staggering 9.0, later revised by some agencies to 9.1. This was not just an earthquake, it was a megaquake. The most powerful ever to strike Japan since records began. One of the 5 most powerful quakes in the entire world since modern seismological record-keeping started in the early 1900s. Its epicenter was located approximately 130 kilometers or 80 miles east of Sendai City in Miyagi Prefecture on Honshu Island. The focus lay deep, about 30 kilometers or 18.6 miles beneath the floor of the western Pacific Ocean. The sheer energy released was monumental. This cataclysmic event was born from the immense pressures at the Japan Trench. Here, the colossal Pacific tectonic plate grinds inexorably, subducting beneath the Okhotsk microplate, part of the larger Eurasian plate. For generations, unimaginable stress had been accumulating along this volatile fault line. On that fateful afternoon, a vast segment of this subduction zone, stretching roughly 300 kilometers long and 150 kilometers wide, suddenly ruptured. It lurched violently by as much as 50 meters or 164 feet east-southeast. It also thrust upwards by about 10 meters or 33 feet. The very seabed was deformed. The shaking across northeastern Japan was terrifyingly intense. It lasted for several agonizing minutes. Skyscrapers in Tokyo, hundreds of kilometers away from the epicenter, swayed like giant reeds in a gale. Buildings closer to the source collapsed. Roads buckled and fissured, infrastructure crumpled. People screamed, seeking safety, their faces etched with raw fear. The earth groaned and roared. But this violent terrestrial convulsion was merely the overture. It had set in motion an even more devastating and far-reaching horror. A colossal displacement of water had begun, a silent monster gathering its strength in the deep ocean. The immense abrupt uplift of the sea floor acted like a gigantic paddle. It displaced a truly colossal volume of Pacific Ocean water. This was the genesis of the monstrous tsunami. A series of colossal waves began to radiate outwards from the epicenter. They traveled with terrifying velocity, approaching speeds of 800 kilometers per hour, or nearly 500 miles per hour, in the open ocean. This was comparable to the cruising speed of a jet airliner. As these waves approached the shallower coastal waters of Japan, their speed decreased, but their height increased dramatically. They transformed into towering walls of water, ready to unleash unimaginable destruction. The first waves struck the coast of Japan with terrifying ferocity. Some reached astonishing heights, with reports of waves measuring up to 10 meters, or 33 feet high. In some constricted bays and inlets, the surges were even higher, with run-up heights locally reaching a catastrophic 40 meters or over 130 feet. These were not merely waves, they were relentless, churning torrents of water. They were laden with debris, carrying cars, boats, and shattered buildings like toys. The sheer power was overwhelming. There was no escape for those caught in its path along the immediate coastline. The ocean itself had turned into an adversary. Coastal towns and cities across the Tohoku region were utterly devastated. Places like Sendai, Ishinomaki, Kamaishi, and Miyako bore the full brunt of the tsunami's fury. The waves surged miles inland, sweeping over protective seawalls as if they were insignificant obstacles. Sendai Airport was inundated, its runways submerged under a murky, swirling deluge. Entire communities were wiped off the map, reduced to wastelands of mud and debris. The black, churning water carried everything before it. It was a scene of complete and utter desolation, a heartbreaking spectacle of nature's wrath. The scale of the inundation was vast. The waters were merciless, a dark, churning maelstrom of destruction. They penetrated deep into the land, flooding agricultural fields, residential areas, and industrial zones. Rivers became conduits for the tsunami's inland surge, carrying the destruction even further. As the floodwaters eventually began to recede, they dragged an enormous quantity of debris, vehicles, shattered homes, and tragically many victims. back out to sea. Large swaths of land remained submerged for days. The landscape was irrevocably scarred, transformed into a scene of heartbreaking ruin. The sheer destructive power was hard to fathom. The human cost of this monumental disaster was utterly staggering. The official figures confirmed nearly 18,500 people dead or missing. Some estimates placed the final toll even higher, perhaps over 20,000 precious lives lost. The vast majority of these victims were claimed by the merciless tsunami. They were drowned in the deluge, unable to escape the rapidly advancing walls of water. Entire families were lost. Communities were decimated. The stories of survival were harrowing, but the stories of loss painted a picture of profound, widespread grief that gripped the entire nation. The sorrow was beyond words. The property damage was on an apocalyptic scale. The earthquake itself caused significant structural damage, but it was the subsequent tsunami that wrought the most extensive devastation. Hundreds of thousands of buildings were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Homes, schools, hospitals, and businesses were simply obliterated. Critical infrastructure, including roads, bridges, railways, and ports, suffered catastrophic damage. The economic impact was immense, running into hundreds of billions of dollars. The task of clearing the debris alone was monumental. Entire towns needed to be rebuilt from scratch, a truly daunting prospect for any nation. As if the earthquake and the tsunami were not catastrophic enough, a third disaster began to unfold at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Located on the coast in Fukushima Prefecture, the plant was directly in the path of the tsunami. The earthquake had caused the active reactors to automatically shut down. However, the towering tsunami waves, far exceeding the plant's design basis for seawall height, surged over its defenses. They inundated the facility. Crucially, the floodwaters disabled the emergency diesel generators. These generators were essential for powering the cooling systems needed to keep the reactor cores stable. Without power to the cooling systems, the nuclear fuel in 3 of the plant's reactors began to overheat. This led to a series of meltdowns. Hydrogen gas, produced from the reaction of steam with the zirconium fuel cladding, accumulated within the reactor buildings. This resulted in several explosions, which breached the containment structures and released radioactive materials into the environment. It became one of the most severe nuclear accidents in history, second only to Chernobyl. A large exclusion zone was established, forcing the evacuation of tens of thousands of residents. This added another layer of fear and uncertainty to an already shattered nation. The terrifying power of the tsunami was not confined to the shores of Japan. Its deadly reach extended across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Warnings were issued in numerous countries. The waves, though diminished in height by the immense distances traveled, were still potent enough to cause damage and concern far from their origin. This was a truly global event, a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of our planet. The ripples of this disaster were felt, quite literally, thousands of miles away. It demonstrated the awesome, far-reaching consequences of such a powerful geological event. Nature's power was on full display. In Hawaii, waves measuring between 3.3 to 3.6 meters or 11 to 12 feet struck the coasts of Kauai and Hawaii Islands, causing considerable damage to harbors and coastal properties. Further north, in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, waves of around 1.5 meters or 5 feet were recorded. Even the western coast of North America was not spared. Tsunami waves up to 2.7 meters or 9 feet high hit coastal areas in California and Oregon, damaging docks and sinking boats. Remarkably, some 18 hours after the earthquake, small waves about 0.3 meters or 1 foot high even reached the coast of Antarctica, causing a portion of the Sulzberger ice shelf to break off. Back in Japan, the immediate aftermath was a scene of unimaginable chaos and profound suffering. As the waters receded, they left behind a nightmarish landscape. Vast areas were coated in thick, toxic sludge and mountains of debris. The retrieval of victims was a grim and heartbreaking task. Hundreds of thousands of people were left homeless, seeking refuge in temporary shelters. The challenges were immense, providing food, water, medical care, and support to the survivors. The long process of cleaning up, rebuilding, and healing had to begin amidst the devastation. The spirit of the Japanese people, however, remained unbroken. More than a decade has passed since that dreadful day of March 11, 2011. The scars, both physical and emotional, remain deep. Yet, amidst the profound loss and the lingering challenges, particularly concerning the Fukushima exclusion zone, the resilience of the Japanese people has shone through. Communities have been rebuilt, though many are forever changed. The world watched in awe at their stoicism, their determination and their collective spirit in the face of such overwhelming adversity. The Great Tohoku earthquake and tsunami serves as a solemn reminder of nature's immense power, and also of humanity's capacity for endurance and recovery.